Good morning. I'm Jane Fielding and I'm head of the Employment, Labour and Equalities team here at Gowling WLG in the UK. And I'm delighted to welcome so many of you to this, which is the second in our series of webinars when we take a look each year at what's coming down the tracks this year in 2022. The topic for today is working with the menopause. And obviously that cuts both ways. It's about for people with the menopause trying to work, and it's for employers trying to support people with going through the menopause at work. I think the fact that we are here today mentioning the word is a massive progress from when I was growing up, when in the 70s and 80s, when there were sort of dark mutterings about the change from older women, which those of us knew, younger ones had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. I'm already engaging with my son and daughter about it and looking forward to the support I'm going to get from them. So things have moved on, and that's a good thing. And the fact we've got 425 of you registered today shows it's clearly a very topical issue for all of you. So I'm delighted to introduce our speaker for today, who is Vivian Reeve, one of the principal associates in our team, who does a lot of work in this area for clients, but also she runs our own internal menopause cafes, so she's very well placed to talk about this. She's going to talk for about 25 minutes. We will leave time at the end for questions. As ever, if we don't get to all of your questions, we will come to you after the webinar, so you will get an answer one way or another. If you want to ask a question, please can you use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen. I normally say if you've got a technical question, please could you use the Q&A function too, but as is typical of these things, our technical support today has some technical issues of their own, so please do use it, but you may be relying on me to help out on the technical aspects, and as the team will tell you, that is not my strength, but we will do our best anyway. So the only other thing I wanted to mention is at the end, we will circulate by email a feedback form. It only takes a couple of minutes to fill in. Please do that. I'll flag it again at the end, but we do use your input to work out what we're going to cover at future sessions. So I will now hand over to Vivian and go mute.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about the menopause today, my favourite topic, and we're going to start out, hopefully you can see the agenda slide there. I'm going to explain what the menopause is, then going to look at the impact it can have at work, the legal backdrop, and then how to lead as an organisation on the menopause. So the first, there we go. So the first thing I wanted to just flag is that the menopause is not one event. It's a kind of series of a phase of change of a woman's life. So it's made up of the perimenopause, the menopause itself, and then the post-menopause phase. It's part of the natural aging process for women. It usually starts between the ages of 45 and 55. For most women, it starts after having 12 months of no periods. But it can be triggered medically and suddenly by treatments like chemotherapy or for endometriosis, or surgically induced if you have a hysterectomy. So it can either be quite gradual or it can be very sudden. The impact on one woman can be very different to another, and overall the main menopause phase can last up to about 10 years. So the perimenopause, which comes before, is the transition period and leading up to the menopause, the main event. And this perimenopause usually lasts around 7 years, starting in a woman's mid-40s. Estrogen and progesterone hormone levels start to change as you produce fewer eggs as a woman. I just wanted to flag as well the premature menopause, which is something different. And this is just to flag that 1 in 100 women under 40 will go through a premature menopause. So it's not very common, but it's not super rare either. So this slide really, I wanted to kind of walk you through some of the symptoms of the menopause. This was my very first lesson in understanding what the menopause was about when I went to my first menopause cafe 2 years ago. It's really not just about a hot flush, as many women and partners and colleagues will know. There are 34 recognised symptoms, which is way more than I had anticipated, and they cover mind and body. So the mind part first there in purple, brain fog is very commonly cited. Brain fog, if you've not experienced it, is a bit like trying to pull your thoughts out of a barrel of treacle. It means that your brain's just going so slowly. You know that you need to be thinking about something else. You can't think what it is, but you know that you're not quite there. Then I think the next two most common, or three most common, are depression, anxiety, and loss of confidence. Of all of the support groups that we've run and experts that I've spoken to and heard from, these three are really key, and often they come hand in hand with the physical symptoms, but often they're the more challenging to deal with. There can be a loss of concentration, reduced self-esteem is also quite common, irritability, mood swings, and insomnia. And then the more physical, if you want, manifestations can be anything from painful joints, headaches, vaginal, urinary and gastro problems, thinning hair, changing skin condition, new allergies, all sorts of things, changing body odor. And so it made me wonder, well, how does it affect all of these things? And the reason is that there are estrogen receptors all over a woman's body. And as you go through the menopause, your estrogen level declines. And so what was previously nourishing the brain, all of your essential organs, your bones, your thermostats, all of that, it starts deteriorating. So that's why it can affect so many different things. So how does it impact you at work? Well, it directly affects half the population, as just over half are women, and it indirectly affects the rest. Women over 50 are the biggest growing demographic at work, and there are estimated to be around 4.9 million menopausal women in the workplace and counting, because that demographic of over 50s is increasing. There's a number of really interesting menopause at work or menopause studies. CIPD did one just over 2 years ago, which reported that 59% of women felt that the menopause impacted them negatively at work, which is a lot of people. Obviously, the number of women in any organisation is going to vary depending on the industry and what it is that you do, but that's a high proportion of your workforce. There's also a study called the Newson study, which rather depressingly recorded that only 14.5% of women felt that they received any support or advice at work. But as Jane said, things are on the up and are improving. So I think we've got cause to hope that that will be improving shortly. So what I thought I would do is just take a couple of common symptoms and talk through a couple of common areas of people management. So the first one is a question about how your symptoms or how women's symptoms might impact on performance. So let's imagine you've got brain fog. It's something that menopausal women have. You might have experienced it if you have a chronic disability. It's incredibly frustrating. At best, you can get through it, and it might just be a phase of a couple of hours or a day. It might be much longer, where you just can't get your brain to work. You can't remember things very well. You can become quite forgetful. It's a really challenging thing to have to deal with. It can mean a loss of concentration because your concentration is even more fleeting sometimes than normal. So if you get an email pings up or somebody calls you or the postman comes and you're working at home, all these things can just completely interrupt your train of thought, which was already a bit sketchy. That understandably can lead to a loss of confidence. And then it can impact on your day-to-day work. It might mean that you're making more errors because you're not able to think completely and immerse yourself in what you're doing. It might mean that you're working slower because your brain is taking longer to get through an exercise, but also you might be trying to double and triple check things because you're anxious that you're not at full, you're not quite working at par. Or it might be that you're just not engaging properly with work because you just can't get through the fog. I've chosen brain fog because we've talked about this a lot in our networks and menopause cafes, and what women have said is it really impacts their perception of their value at work and their chances of whether they've got enough energy to go for promotion, and that then links into the gender pay gap, because it's relatively well accepted that the gender pay gap is not too bad till it's about late 40s, and then it drops off a cliff somewhat. And it's no coincidence that that is the age that many women may be struggling with the perimenopause or the menopause. So you've got all of that, and then if you add into that worry and insomnia, you can see how that can really impact on your performance at work. If we have a look then at conduct, let's pick another symptom, let's say irritability on top of a couple of other things. It might be that you're usually perfectly able to deal with communication and people you work with, but let's say that you have not been sleeping and you're feeling particularly irritable, and something that you would have taken in your stride leads to an outburst, or you lose your patience. It might be, however, out of character, that then that's dealt with as a misconduct issue, as we'll see in a minute when we look at some of the cases. Rather than trying to get to the bottom of it, you could see perhaps that might lead to a warning, or something worse, depending on what the outburst was and who it was, who was listening, etc. That then adds to your pain, your physical pain perhaps, but also your mental pain. You're just trying to deal with this, and the fact that you've been perhaps sanctioned for something that you don't really feel is your fault. So the last thing I wanted to look at then is absence, which is a very common issue with menopausal symptoms. So let's pick some of the really embarrassing symptoms of incontinence, which is a fairly common symptom. Itchy skin. We have some women in our network who, it's not just a bit like having a bite, it can feel like the skin's really burning. It's very difficult to concentrate and not scratch your skin. And body odor, because body odor can change, and I think everybody is, most people are quite conscious of body odor anyway, so to feel it's changed and you're not quite in control of it is really difficult. So these kind of embarrassing symptoms might mean that, when we go back to work, more commonly in the office, or perhaps when you're supposed to be in the office rather than working from home, that could be something that means, you don't feel confident enough, you don't know if you're going to be near a bathroom, it's just too much, so you take some time off. Depending on how much time you're taking, that could lead to an absence management process. You can then feel demoralized by that, or you can see how somebody could, then the relationship between employee and employer could deteriorate. That might lead to a grievance or worse. So these are obviously the worst case scenarios. It's not going to happen in every situation, but it leads into the tribunal cases that we're going to have a look at to explain how we get there. So the first case was from 2018. It's a tribunal case, so it's not binding, but it is guidance, and I think there are relatively few cases that get all the way with menopause. I thought it was an interesting one to start with. So Miss Davies was suffering from extensive menopausal symptoms: heavy bleeding, anemia, memory loss, stress, palpitations, anxiety. The list goes on for this poor lady. She worked in the Scottish courts and tribunals, so she was working in the court setting. She was taking medication for some of her symptoms, and the medication she had to dissolve in a jug of water. She'd left this on her desk. When she came back into the courtroom, she saw that there were two men who seemed to be drinking from her water jug. She panicked, thinking, oh gosh, if that's got my medication in. So she told them. They didn't react well. One of them reacted very badly, lost his temper and ranted at her. And her employer, the Scottish courts, launched an investigation into her conduct and what had happened with this medication. Sadly and frustratingly, they carried out an investigation, and it came out pretty quickly that had the medication been in the water, it would have changed colour, it would have changed pink, and it hadn't. So they were concerned about why it seemed that she hadn't realised that. Now, instead of perhaps putting it down to error, they had decided, based on the investigation they did, that she had deliberately lied about it. She was dismissed for gross misconduct, which is quite a really concerning outcome. She brought a claim in the tribunal for unfair dismissal and disability discrimination, and the tribunal found for her, and they found that it wasn't a reasonable belief that she had lied during this investigation. She'd become confused and stressed, and for the employer to focus on a belief that she'd lied rather than accepting her evidence that she had become stressed. They acknowledged the fact that actually that her condition could cause memory loss and panic. And they also found that she'd been discriminated against because of her, not because of the disability itself, her conditions, but because she then had a tendency to forget and be forgetful and panic and have anxiety about this. So I think this is a good example. We would all hope it wouldn't get anywhere near this far, but unfortunately it did. And it's a couple of years ago, and I think things are moving on at pace with understanding the menopause, but it was quite an extreme reaction, I thought, to something that could have quite easily been explained. The second case was from last year, so it's more recent, and it's from the Appeal Tribunal, which is helpful because it is binding on other tribunals in similar situations. So it's the case of Ms. Rooney in Leicester Council. This lady was a social worker, and she had several periods of absence due to menopause-related symptoms and stress. She had even more symptoms than our previous lady: insomnia, fatigue, dizziness, stress, palpitations, migraines, hot flushes. She had the works. She was having treatment under a consultant and receiving help for that. And her employers were trying to support through going through the occupational health at work as well. There were a number of things that led to the relationship breaking down, one of which was that when she was going through the occupational health assessment process, the assessment was carried out by a man, which she found very difficult because some of her symptoms were very personal, embarrassing. She had asked for somebody else, but it wasn't possible. Her manager, she felt, was dismissive of some of her symptoms. She talked about having hot flushes, and he said, "Oh yeah, I get hot too." And I think possibly he was trying to empathise, but that's not how it came across. And she was given a written warning for her absence levels in front of 4 men, which I think she found particularly distressing. Just trying to get to my next slide. My mouse has disappeared. There we go. So the case history is a little complicated because there were 2 claims brought. She had solicitors, and then she put in a new claim herself. But essentially, the bit I want to focus on was the dismissal issue. So she claimed constructive dismissal and sex and disability discrimination. Her claims were struck out initially by the tribunal because they said she wasn't disabled. They didn't accept that her menopausal symptoms amounted to a disability, and they thought that her sex discrimination claim didn't have any prospects of success, no reasonable prospects rather. She appealed to the Employment Appeal Tribunal, and they found for her, and they said that the tribunal hadn't properly analysed her case because they acknowledged the fact that she had become really forgetful. She forgot to attend events, she lost things easily, left the iron on, left the cooker on, all these different things, but they didn't accept that all those things, or even some of them put together, amounted to a substantial impact. So with disability discrimination, remember, we're looking at the definition. It's got to be a physical or mental impairment. It's got to be have a substantial impact on day-to-day life and be likely, it already lasted 12 months, will be likely to last 12 months. So although they acknowledged all these symptoms, which were quite serious, they then didn't follow through and accept that she was disabled, but they didn't explain why. So it's gone back now to a new tribunal, and it's due to be heard next week. So we're all looking out to see what happens. There was another case that came out just this week, which is quite exciting, about a lady, less dramatic, but interesting, I thought, so I'll share it with you quickly. This lady, Miss Best, worked in a pet shop, and there was a customer who came in, and at the tills she talked about having a hot flush. I imagine because she was trying to find her wallet or remember what day it was, or any of those things that go along with hot flushes. Afterwards, after she'd left, there was a conversation between staff about this, and Miss Best said, "I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to talk about menopause. I just don't want to think about it." But her manager kept talking to her about the menopause, and then asked her if she was being menopausal, but she didn't take particularly kindly to. It was found, so she complained to his wife, who was also another boss, who took that very badly and then told her off for making trouble and just get on with life. And the tribunal found that that amounted to harassment, because she'd made it very clear she didn't want to talk about it, and they kept talking about it and then asked her if she was menopausal. So I thought that was an interesting update, and I think really probably most of us would know not to push that button. I don't know why we did really, but anyway. So I wanted to just talk then through about these legal obligations that are relevant when you are considering workplace menopause issues. So the first one is health and safety. So employers have the duty to protect the health, safety and welfare of employees and any other people who might be affected. The second one is the duty of trust and confidence, which sits between employees and employers, and it works both ways, but you have a duty as an employer not to breach that trust that your staff place in you. And then the third and most relevant one, which we're going to talk about in most detail, is protection from discrimination. But the question is, what kind of discrimination? So last year, the government opened an inquiry into the impact of menopause at work, which was really good news because it very much does need to hear and consider whether women are properly protected. The issue at the moment is that there is no clear route to use if you consider that you have been discriminated against because you're going through menopause. There is no menopause characteristic. So women have to rely on a combination already of sex, age or disability discrimination, none of which really work. Why don't they work? Well, because if you're going to bring a sex discrimination case, and it's most likely going to be a direct discrimination, so I've been treated less favourably than you because I'm a woman, go through the menopause and you're a man, then you have to choose a comparator. If we're talking, let's say, go back to our example about being sanctioned or dismissed for absence because of menopausal symptoms, well, your comparator would likely be a man with a health condition with similar absence levels. Would he also have been dismissed? Probably, in most circumstances he would, so that doesn't get you anywhere. Age is difficult because women go through menopause at all different stages of life, although it's the second part of a woman's life. As you see from the beginning, perimenopause can be 7 years, the menopause can be 10, and then you've got postmenopause, so it's difficult to pick the right age group. So most of the discussion is about whether you can fit a claim into disability discrimination. I was part of the Employment Lawyers Association working group that put in a really detailed response to the government, and we looked at tribunal statistics, the practicalities of how women cope at work, all sorts of things, and I thought it was relevant to just pinpoint a couple of those bits for you today. So as you can see on the slide, we looked at the period 2017 to 2021, and out of nearly 79,000 tribunal claims all that time, there were only 44 decisions that talked about menopause, had the word menopause in. Of those, in some of those, it was just mentioned in passing. There are 27 relevant decisions where it's talked about in a bit more detail. And there are, of the 10 cases out of that where disability was properly looked at as an issue, only in 3 cases did symptoms amount to disability. So you might think, well, why are we getting worried about this? If there's only, a handful of cases, it's a drop in the ocean. The reason is that all of the evidence, CIPD surveys, the Newson survey, the Leicester survey, there's lots of evidence, research been done in the last couple of years. They all show that the tribunal numbers do not show the full picture at all. There are a lot of issues, workplace issues, and there are a number of reasons why that number is so low for tribunal claims. Partly it's because there's no clear path. You can't just pick the menopause characteristic. And although we're doing brilliant work now as a society, I think Maria Frustrup's all over it. She's got a new book out, Davina McCall, fantastic programme on TV last year. It's still quite embarrassing. Some of these symptoms are so embarrassing, and it's still quite taboo. And I think there's a fear of how you're seen. Do you really want to bring a claim and be cross-examined, possibly by a man in front of other men in a tribunal? There's lots of reasons why those tribunal numbers do not reflect the issue. So coming back to disability, as I mentioned before, the disability definition is mental or physical impairment. I think the first thing that was talked about, so last week, this is a geeky thing but exciting for me, the Women and Equality Select Committee had their live parliamentary session on this, and Marion Bloodsworth from ELA was talking about our research that went back to the government. And one of the things that was discussed was this very first definition, so mental or physical impairment. Do we really want to be using impairment when we're talking about the menopause? We don't use the word impairment when we talk about pregnancy or maternity. We have a separate characteristic for that. If we're talking about disability, the first thing when you Google menopause and disability is it will say, whatever it is, oh, well, menopause is not a disability, it's a normal part of women's life. Well, it is. So this is also part of the problem. it can be really difficult to find the evidence to show that you have suffered from these symptoms and that they are long-term, as some of the cases just show, partly because, well, lots of reasons, but partly because so many of the symptoms, I think, certainly hadn't, I think a lot of people don't naturally associate with the menopause. So you wouldn't necessarily go to your doctor and say, I seem to be having real continence issues, and then say, oh, do you think you might be going through menopause? Because it doesn't obviously link to it. And also because GPs, amazingly, don't actually have to study the menopause as part of their training at all. So it might be that you don't know to ask about it. It's too embarrassing to ask about. It might not be on your records because you've not been to your GP, or because your GP didn't think to put it down or ask about menopause. So that's a real barrier, I think, to being able to prove that you've got that evidence. Before we move on, I just wanted to recap, really, that the menopause isn't a disability, but it doesn't matter, because the symptoms of the of the menopause might be, either on their own if they're really serious, or when joined together with some of the other symptoms that people might have to deal with. So what as a takeaway, what I think we need to be doing is considering the impact of people's symptoms that could have on any aspect of the employment relationship. So whether it's attendance and timekeeping, whether it's you know, how you have conversations and banter, and through to everything about your performance, your productivity, whether you can remember things, your ability to do specific kinds of work even. And I think the usual rules should apply. It's a bit like some of the conversations we've had about supporting with mental health in the last number of years, is that when you're looking at something, just, you know, an employment issue, just bear in mind, could this be because of a disability? Could it be because of the menopause? And factor that in, and then possibly think about whether you need to factor that into a conversation. The good news is it's not that difficult actually to help somebody who's suffering at work or working remotely. All of the conversations we've had, and if you look at ACAS guidance, and there's lots of information out there, it's the small things often that make a really massive difference. And as with many kind of disability issues, often the reasonable adjustments are not that costly at all. It just takes a bit of thinking. So what I put on the slide is what we've learned over the last couple of years as a firm, and also in running our networks and working with clients on menopause. The first thing is that it really needs to come from the top. It's no good if this is just a kind of employment bit or an HR bit. It needs to be coming from the top, in that management need to understand that this is a risk issue, just as pregnancy is an issue, just as any other health issue, duty of health and safety. This is an issue that the management and risk teams need to be thinking about. It needs to be part of equalities training. I know not everybody has the benefit of having an HR team or an equalities team, but there's lots of material and we can help with that sort of thing. It's not that difficult, but the key is it needs to come. People need to know it's not just a niche thing, and it's not just a women thing. It's a firm, it's an everyone thing. The physical adjustments that we've talked about and we've put in place in our firm, which seem quite commonplace, are things like thinking about where women sit. Some women need access to be able to go to the bathroom more easily, access to fans just to cool the air down, access to bathrooms and rest areas. It's often what people need is just the ability to just go and be somewhere where they're not going to be interrupted. They don't want to be in the sick room, and they don't necessarily need to be. They just need to get outside of where they're working, perhaps take a few layers off, cool down, or just, you know, power down to get rid of that brain fog for a while. And then adapting how we work. So processes, perhaps allowing more time for people, not giving people such short deadlines if you know that they need a bit of extra time around the side of it, a bit like the support many of us are providing in terms of mental health. So I thought I'd end with what's coming up. So hopefully at some point we'll get a response to the government inquiry and the evidence that we and lots of other organisations put in about the whether menopause is effectively managed and looked at work. One of the outcomes that was proposed is that we have a new menopause protected characteristic under the Equality Act, but to recognise the fact that it's not just sex, it's not just age, and it's not just disability, it's about all three. And I don't think this is, you know, as big a leap as it sounds, because we do have one for pregnancy, so we could recognise that and do something similar for menopause. There's been so much campaigning done over the last couple of years. I've forgotten her name, the MP. There's a female MP who's doing amazingly well. She took the campaign to Parliament a couple of weeks ago, and HRT costs are going to be subsidised, which is fantastic. And I think more employers are being vocal about the support they're giving. So Kellogg's and ASOS and all sorts of other employers are offering paid menopause leave and support. And I think this is great, because the more it's talked about and the more it's just another workplace issue, the better we'll be able to help people thrive at work and stop people being absent or feeling like they've got to leave work early when they've got plenty more to give. So that's it.
Great. Thanks, Vivian. Caroline Noakes was that lady, one of our guests has just put that on the chat, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember her talking, so yeah, very, very compelling. We've had loads of fantastic questions. I can see now we're going to struggle to get to all of them, but we will do our best. One I can answer very quickly while you take a drink, Vivian, because you answered it, which was, am I right that no extra protection in law exists yet, but just using existing law regulations? So yes, as you explained, at the moment people are trying to shoehorn it into one of the existing protected characteristics, and we'll see what changes. There's a question which I think we always get, don't we? Do men have a menopause?
They have the andropause. So there is a change in men as well. From the age of about 30 to 40, their testosterone starts reducing from about 2% a year on average. But the difference is it's a very gradual, I hate the word decline, but decline. And there aren't really any kind of key symptoms that cause difficulty, really. So it's not the same as the menopause really at all. So they do similarly go through a change, but it's much less dramatic.
Yeah, okay. We've got a few practical questions. The first one, if you've got someone in your team or your HR and somebody else has come to you and said, I think this person is struggling a bit, I think they may be menopausal, how do you approach that conversation? Indeed, should you even link what's concerning menopause?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thoughtfully, but it's not that difficult, actually. So I think the first thing is to bear in mind it's good that somebody's asked the question and noticed. That's brilliant. I think the thing to think about first is that it could be menopause, it could be nothing to do with it. And it might be that person wants to talk about it and has been waiting for somebody to notice, or it might be that they would just die inside slightly if somebody mentions it and they've got no interest in talking about it at all. So I think the way I would come at it, and having discussed it with one of the leading menopause experts, Dan, who we have in to work with us sometimes, the best way to go at it is kind of sideways. So rather than start putting your 2 foot in straight away, asking if somebody's menopausal, which isn't likely to go well, I think it would be arranging a coffee or a chat or a walk, even whatever you can manage at the moment, and just say, is everything all right? So I've noticed that you've been off lately, or you've not quite been yourself, and just invite somebody to talk if they want to. And I think it's a bit like having conversations when you're concerned about someone's mental health. It's not that likely that you're going to get all the information and there's going to be this great chat the first time. It might be that you come back to it again in a few days' time, or the next week, or something like that, or that they then go to talk to somebody they feel comfortable talking with. And I think a bit like mental health, you need to think who's the best person to have that conversation, because it might be that they are ready to talk about it and they're not bothered about how embarrassing it is at all. They've just not quite got around to it. It might be they really do not want to talk to somebody young or somebody male. They would like to talk to somebody who is more of that age, who might empathise. So I think coming at it from the side, perhaps, rather than putting your 2 hoofers in and just saying, is everything okay? Is there something I can help with? And if you can then link them to somebody who can help them out.
Yeah, so like you would with any difficult subject where something looks a bit amiss. Yeah. There's a question from somebody who's obviously thinking about gauging how people feel about it and how it's affecting them in the workplace, which is, how would you approach conducting a study in the workplace to understand how menopause affects members, given it's a sensitive topic and it may set the wrong tone, look intrusive to target particular people for their views?
That's really interesting. A really good question. I think the way to do it would be, and Jane will have a view on this as well, but I think my view would be it's a good idea to ask the question, to try and get, put your toe in the water and find out, because until you know how many people roughly it's affecting and how it's affecting them, you might be putting in things to change something that doesn't need changing. You're focusing your energy in the wrong place. So I think perhaps some kind of questionnaire is a good idea. I think probably something anonymous, or with the ability to be anonymous, but also to everybody, because as I said at the beginning, it affects women directly, but it also affects everybody else. So one of the things that we found for the work we've been doing is that there's so many men who know about it. They know something, they want to do something, they haven't got a clue what to say, much like women, but they don't want to say the wrong thing. And actually they're having to deal with it indirectly because their spouse or their sister or their colleague at work is potentially going through it, and they need some help as well. So I think I'd have something that asks questions broad enough that you could get both perspectives. What do you reckon, Jane?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because I think we also, right though it is that we're focusing on it, and in many workplaces and society, it's there's a greater willingness to talk about it, even though, as you said rightly, Vivian, earlier, some of the symptoms are embarrassing to talk about, and people would probably prefer not to. I think we have to remember that not everybody experiences it in the same way as some lucky people have a very easy pregnancy, a very easy birth.
Yeah,
people go through the menopause very easily. So we certainly don't want to get into, sorry, I'm just turning the lights back on, into stereotypical assumptions, which in itself would trigger a harassment claim if you were perceived to be menopausal and you weren't.
Yeah.
So I think it's having an open mind and sensitivity and emotional intelligence, like many of these difficult issues in the workplace.
Yeah.
We've got time for a couple more, and they're still coming in, which is great. Clearly struck a theme here. Somebody's asked whether in the consultation that's going on, I guess on the back of the Women Inequalities Committee work, if endometriosis is also being considered, given that there's quite an overlap with the symptoms of the menopause. Do you know if it's being looked at?
I don't know, actually. I will have a look at the submission that was put in. I know that there is some overlap, and it's one of the reasons why that can trigger a really sudden, really difficult menopause. But I don't know, actually. I don't remember that coming up specifically, but it might have done. So I'm happy to look at the paper again and update on that.
Sure. And there's a sort of allied question, which is, would you advise employers to have a specific menopause policy or more general guidance on how to deal with a sort of range of medical conditions, including the menopause, endometriosis, so other gynecological conditions that can impact at any stage of life?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing, policies are definitely helpful because they show that there's an awareness, and there's there's somewhere where you can go as staff to look at something, and you can see that it's given the seriousness to warrant a policy. I don't think it matters too much whether it's part of a broader policy or not. I think the key is that you have the support and have the learning available. And what we all want to avoid is putting the effort into making a policy and then nobody taking any notice of it, which would be the worst thing. So the things that we found really have helped is we've got a little, on our intranet, we've got a kind of policy site. It's not a policy per se in that it's kind of 5 pages long, but it's a site where we share guidance, and there's an information section about a kind of little summary of what we started with today about what the menopause is and how it could affect people, so that people can very quickly see that it's really not just about hot flushes, and it's a lot more serious than that. I think there's definitely merit in having a policy, and certainly something like whether it's, I don't know, the only thing about a policy about encompassing other gynae issues is whether that accidentally reinforces the view that it's a women's thing. I don't know. But either way, either that or a kind of wellness or well-being policy, that kind of thing, I think, because as your question suggests, the issue is the awareness and how to deal with it, because broadly it's whether it's disability or not, it's all the same sort of thing. It's just that there's certain specific issues specific to the menopause. But yeah, I think the learning point is absolutely critical, whether it's in a policy or otherwise.
Sure. Okay. And even if it's not a disability, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be
Yeah.
probably shouldn't be supported, does it? Even if
Absolutely.
we don't tend to try and get into that analysis in the early stages.
No, absolutely. And it doesn't really matter, I think, as you say, Jane, that the important thing is, does somebody need help? Yes. Well, how can we do it? How can we give them the help they need?
Okay, great. As predicted, we haven't got to all the questions and they are still popping up. So we are going to have to draw it to a close now. But as I said, we will follow up with you if your question didn't get answered and wasn't one of the ones we were able to pick up. So thank you very much to you all for dialing in today. Hopefully you've learned something and it was useful. But please do fill in those feedback forms, which you'll get by email, so we can gauge that for sure. And please do join us next Tuesday, same time, 11 o'clock, when we'll be doing the third of our webinars, looking at the sort of legal and other issues that arise from hybrid working. So thank you very much to Vivian. Thank you.
Thank you.
And have a good rest of the day.
Thanks.